We told you about how much it costs to raise a child. Now know how much it costs to send them abroad. And believe me, that too is a very big figure. So to talk about that, I've decided to bring on board Anshuman Mishra of LoanAdda, which not only, of course, is an online new age loan and lending portal, but Anshuman himself takes a very keen interest in advising students who wish to go abroad. Anshuman, thanks so much for joining in on ETNOW. Nowadays, of course, it's a fad, whether you're a graduate, whether you're an undergraduate, to go abroad and study. But the question is, while there are various options out there from America to Europe to UK, what exactly are the sort of costs that are entailed? If you could categorize it for us.
Mubina, the first thing you are seeing right now is that if you talk of an undergrad education, as the US calls it, or graduation as we call it after 12th standard, so US is the primary destination. And being number one, the costs are also high. So it costs on an average for a 4-year graduation course to do 1 to 1.5 crores in the 4 years, which includes the living costs, the tuition fees. So typically on a annual basis, you have a cost of 22 lakhs of tuition fees, and around 9 lakhs you can add on living expenses. The second most destination which students want to go is the UK. So UK has slightly lesser cost. So that costs around 60 to 70 lakhs for the 3-year course, because UK has typically 3-year courses. The third joint rank is between Canada and Australia. So what happens in that is, in all these 4 places, there are some ways that yes, it costs a high amount, but you can do 2 things essentially to reduce those costs. One is that there are some ways and tips that we can give students to reduce the overall cost, and second is a scholarship. So we will talk about that in when you ask the next question, actually.
Exactly. But Anshuman, apart from, of course, tuition, etc., there are also, of course, other expenses. And I'm talking about living expenses. I'm talking about, even for that matter, every time the child will come to visit his or her parents back home in India. From US to Germany to Singapore to Australia, roughly how much of the total education cost actually goes into the other ancillary costs like these?
See, the US costs on average, $1,000 a month to live in. That's around 70,000 INR. If you take UK, it's slightly more expensive. You can take, 85,000 Indian rupees per month. Australia and Canada is slightly, cheaper. Now, the thing is that the average Indian student comes back once every 1.5 years. Now, if you start coming back more, or if you, have a very frugal life as compared to what the students can have otherwise, you can reduce those costs. So if these living tuition costs are bifurcated into an individual's ability to live life as a student, because a student's life during that time, you have to focus on education, because it's quite expensive. Unless you take a Germany or a Ireland, which are new age places where tuition fees virtually become zero, it's just living cost. But otherwise, if the destination is US, where most of the students want to go, or UK, where they want to study and then hopefully work in, you will have to ensure that these overhead costs, like your visa costs, your travel costs, your one-time costs like your dormitory costs, which are sometimes taken for the whole semester, on some colleges take for the full year. Then you may want to think that, okay, do I want to go to an Indiana, which is very, very cold, or do I want to go to the East Coast? So these factors affect the parents, and most of the time the parent has to decide this, because one of the most important factors is not the country, but the college. So the parent and the child are today at sea to think of what kind of colleges you go, because it's just not your college. It's your course that you want to decide. Within the course, what kind of electives you want to take. All of these factors, affect the cost. So essentially, that these costs are not fixed. They can, skyrocket. But at the same time, you can manage them by, say, taking a loan or taking some exams like advanced placement test.
Fair enough. Anshuman, when we talk about, of course, it being the parents' headache, of incurring these costs, let's also talk about education loans. I mean, now, of course, you have all these instruments out there in the market to help ease off, of course, the parents' burden. So how exactly is an education loan viable? What are the average interest costs as well? Because if an education loan falls under a personal loan category, that means the interest rate is usually a bit higher, isn't it, Anshuman?
See, this education loan is on an average cost between 12 to 14% in Indian, if you take it in India, of course. What happens in this case in education loans? There are two advantages as compared to taking a mortgage loan against property loan. That for 4 years or 3 years, whatever the time that you're taking the loan, you don't have to make any repayment. So basically, the repayment starts either 6 months from the time you get a job after the course, or 1 year after the course, whether or not you get a job. So when that happens, along with that, you have an ATE. So you get income tax benefit under a section. So yes, it is 12 to 14%, but the other option which parents do see, that if you want to reduce your costs, so property has to be taken. Now, loans today for education can be given to the tune of 50 lakhs, even a crore. But you have to understand that this debt burden, now you have to essentially see that 4 years of education, and then after that, if you're paying it for say 5-7 years, is a 12-year tenure. So even if you're taking it for 12 to 14%, that's a huge outflow. So compared to that, the other option that happens for parents is that how can you take a loan against property at a lesser rate? Now loan against properties are sub 10% for that matter as compared to education loan. But yes, if you are trying to go to US, you should think of an Ivy League and a good college. That will cost you around average median of 1 crore. In that, if you take 40-50 lakhs of a loan and then 40-50 lakhs, because you have to understand that you can just break up your costs, because you don't have to pay this entire 1 crore in the first year. There are 4 years for you to earn and give that amount. Of course, the loan can be scheduled. So do not send your child to the US or anywhere without tying up the entire resources. That's very, very risky, because there are instances of children which they cannot do some part-time work or something. So please ensure, for the safety and security of the children, you do a financial closure. So for the child, yes, if you're sending to UK, yes, you should have 50 lakhs. If you're sending to the US, you should have 1 crore. If in case you're now sending to post-graduation, suppose you're going to London School of Economics, okay? So after graduation, if you're sending, that's a 10-month course. So that costs around 30 lakhs for 1 year. So that can be much lesser, but come what may, whichever place you decide to go, do not just send the child with the money in hand. Ensure that you know that there is a fair amount of visibility in the next 6 months to 12 months, what amount of money can come, so that the child can focus on the education and does not have to run around for funds locally around there.